What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode. Dr. Mike Axler here, PhD in kinesiology and applied physiology, professor of exercise science, and 60-plus time marathoner and ultramarathoner. Have you ever heard that doing any form of cardiovascular exercise or any form of cardio, to shorten it, can blunt both your strength and your hypertrophy gains? It seems right now there's a whole group of folks out there who are running full speed into the hybrid training game, while others who lift are slowly getting their steps in, or at least quote unquote, talking about getting their steps in. And they don't want to lose any bit of muscular gains, muscular strength as possible. And this really has become more of an outdated myth in recent years. And in today's episode, we'll be talking about the actual science behind concurrent training with both running or endurance activities, as well as the strength and hypertrophy training in the gym. So the idea that cardio automatically blunts hypertrophy and or strength is based on early misinterpretations of the interference effect, which we've talked about in previous videos. But more recent research shows that the impact depends largely on how you program your cardio and not whether you do cardio at all. Cardio is not by any means the enemy. It is the poor programming that gets people into trouble most of the time. When applied strategically, aerobic training can actually support recovery from lifting. It can increase mitochondrial function and mitochondrial density, as we'll soon talk about, as well as work capacity, without compromising your strength gains. So in today's episode, we'll be talking about the interference effect, which refers to the idea that concurrent endurance and resistance training can compete for adaptive resources. But this only happens under specific conditions like excessive volume, poor sequencing, or overly frequent high-intensity cardio sessions. Further in today's episode, we will also detail how to structure your week, a little skeleton outline you can work off of, including optimal cardio types like cycling, running, stair-step, or rower, frequency, and timing, so that your aerobic training complements your lifting goals as opposed to conflicting with them. So with that in mind, let's begin. I want to first get into where this myth actually came from, like the origin, so to speak. So the belief that endurance training inhibits muscle growth largely stems from this landmark Hickson 1980 study where participants trained both strength and endurance daily and at maximal intensity with no rest days, which sounds awful. This extreme protocol led to diminished strength and hypertrophy gains, which were later generalized to all forms of concurrent training. The issue with the early research is that it lacked validity. We know that few athletes actually train both modalities daily at very high intensity. Yet the findings from Hickson's study shaped decades of coaching dogma, which reinforced a widespread fear that cardio and muscle do not mix. Many early studies also showed interference effects, but they failed to control for things like recovery, nutrition, or proper periodization, which, as we know, are incredibly important variables. The lack of intelligent programming created this perfect storm for overtraining rather than reflecting a fundamental physiological incapability. We now know that the interference effect is not inevitable, it's just contextual. When endurance and resistance training are stacked without recovery or with excessive volume, anabolic signaling pathways like mTOR, which we discussed in previous episodes and we'll be talking more about today, do get blunted. But that's a failure of design, not of biology. Modern meta-analyses, however, like Wilson et al. In 2012, do reveal that concurrent training does not significantly impair hypertrophy when designed with strategic separation of modalities. In fact, combining aerobic and resistance training can improve body composition as well as performance when appropriately periodized. More recent work by Schumann et al. In 2021 and others show that modality order, the intensity, as well as the rest windows all play critical roles in your performance outcomes, such that when resistance training is periodized and cardio is low to moderate intensity, interference is minimal or non-existent, especially in recreational and trained individuals. All right, let's now dive into what the research actually says before we get on to how to program your cardio without killing your gains. So a little bit more on the interference effect here and it being inherently context dependent. The often cited interference effect is highly dependent on how the training is programmed. What the research details is that endurance training only modestly blunts hypertrophy when cardio is high in frequency and duration, like training for a marathon or training for an ultra, particularly when doing concurrently with resistance training without rest. When cardio is kept low to moderate frequency, however, and separated by several hours or even different days, resistance training sessions do impact muscle growth very positively. So there's no interference effect. This suggests that interference is not an inevitable outcome. It's primarily an issue of poor training design, not an inherent biological limitation. The type of endurance training you choose can also play a large role. Cycling, for example, whether you're going to cycle outside or you're going to cycle inside on a stationary bike, cycling has shown to cause far less interference with strength and hypertrophy adaptations than running, likely due to lower eccentric loading and reduced muscle damage. Running, as all of you know who do it, introduces way more eccentric stress, which can lead to greater activation of AMPK, which is an energy-sensing enzyme that may inhibit mTOR, which we've talked about in previous episodes. mTOR is the key driver of muscle protein synthesis. However, this effect is short-lived and context-specific, especially when recovery, intensity, and order of training modalities are controlled. Concurrent training doesn't inhibit gains when spaced dosed improperly. Further, well-structured concurrent training does not necessarily have to hinder strength or hypertrophy, especially when modalities are separated by 6 or more hours or done on alternate days, such that the consensus is now that any and all interference is negligible in trained individuals if volume and intensity are intelligently managed. Spacing workouts, and here's the kicker, prioritizing your resistance training allows for full activation of the mTOR pathway without excessive competition from endurance-induced AMPK signaling. This means that lifters can reap cardiovascular and muscular benefits simultaneously if they train smart and not just hard. And I talked about this in a couple of videos ago with respect to hybrid training or concurrent training, in that if you are a strength-based athlete who wants to also incorporate running, do your strength training first in the day in like an AM session, and then do your running in a PM. Conversely, if you're an endurance athlete and you want to start getting stronger and putting on muscle, still do all of your endurance work in the AM and some of your strength training in the PM. So that's what we're seeing here, is that the strength training is going to increase mTOR, which increases muscle protein synthesis, whereas the cardiovascular training is going to increase AMPK. And AMPK and mTOR do not really mesh well together when really put together at high intensities and high durations. But if you just separate out the modalities of strength training and endurance training, you should be fine. Awesome. How to program cardio without killing your gains. We're going to go through 5 of them here. So, number 1 is going to be separate your cardio and lifting by at least 6 hours if you still want to do them on the same day. Concurrent endurance and resistance training sessions performed back-to-back can blunt molecular signals for muscle protein synthesis, particularly when endurance is done first. However, Separating sessions by at least 6 hours allows mTOR and AMPK, and as we said, they're two competing cellular pathways, to recover independently, minimizing interference. Spacing your cardio and your lifting sessions gives your body time to shift its recovery and adaptation focus. This helps preserve the anabolic response to strength training while still gaining cardiovascular benefits, especially in athletes training for both performance and body composition. And if you really just kind of think about this intuitively, if you want to hit a heavy squat, a heavy deadlift, or a heavy bench press, you're not going to want to run right before for 20 minutes or even an hour because you're going to be more tired. You're going to have less energy in the tank, right? So it just seems intuitive that the way that you're going to feel going into that session, that's what the science backs up. So if you do want to lift heavy and you still want to run, just lift heavy first and run around 6 hours later in the day. So if you're going to do 8 a.m. and 5 p.m., that's more than enough time. What is that? That's like 4 plus, it's 9 hours, right? You can totally do that. Number 2, prioritize resistance training if your goal is strength and hypertrophy. Here we go. Resistance training should come first in your workout or your day if your primary goal is to build muscle and or get stronger. And if you want to know why I said and or, just watch any of my other videos because I talk about hypertrophy and strength. Performing cardio first can deplete glycogen and elevate fatigue. As we know, we burn more and more and more calories doing cardio. And this has been shown to reduce force production and training quality during lifting sessions. Starting with weights ensures you hit your reps with good form and sufficient intensity, which is essential for mechanical tension, which, as we know, mechanical tension is the main driver of hypertrophy. Endurance training can still support recovery and heart health, but strength adaptations require priority in both the order and the energy allocation. Next, number 3 on how to program correctly, use low impact cardio like incline walking, cycling, swimming, rowing, etc. to minimize joint stress and recovery burden. Low impact modalities like cycling and incline treadmill walking place significantly less eccentric stress on the joints in comparison with running, which reduces muscle damage and recovery demands. Research has consistently shown cycling to be far less disruptive to lower body strength gains than running in concurrent training programs. If you do choose more joint-friendly cardio options, you can accumulate cardiovascular adaptations without competing with your recovery from lifting. And this is going to be especially important for lifters training multiple times per week or older adults managing orthopedic stress, so you can always train your cardiovascular system. Number 4, keep your cardio sessions short to moderate, so around 20 to 40 minutes, and at low to moderate intensities, and zone 2 is going to be ideal. If you keep your endurance workouts in that 20 to 40 minute range at low to moderate intensities around zone 2, something we basically talk about in every single episode on this channel, this can improve mitochondrial density and cardiovascular health without impairing strength or hypertrophy gains. Since we're already talking about it, let me further sell you on zone 2 cardio. Zone 2 cardio supports fat oxidation, aerobic capacity, and recovery between lifting sets. Since zone 2 is not overly taxing, it's going to complement strength goals well and can enhance general work capacity without dipping too far into your recovery reserves. And we'll be talking about increasing work capacity soon and why this can be so beneficial for long-term positive adaptations. And lastly, number 5, avoid high-intensity interval training immediately after heavy lifting days, as it may reduce recovery capacity. HIIT, or high-intensity interval training, again, if you're not an acronym person, performed after intense resistance sessions may compromise recovery by increasing systemic fatigue and inflammation. Research has found that back-to-back intense sessions can delay recovery and suppress neuromuscular function for upwards of 48 hours. Lifting already stresses the central nervous system and musculoskeletal tissues. We know that. But adding HIIT too soon afterward may increase cortisol and impair sleep, which are critical for muscle repair and strength progression. Strategic spacing ensures both systems recover optimally. And this has been a relatively new scientific insight as well. Even when I was in college and grad school over the past 10 years, I spent a lot of time in the gym and watching YouTube videos and listening to podcasts and reading books. And what the whole talk was about at that time and what Orange Theory Fitness really based their whole company around was this idea of EPOC. Again, if you're not an acronym person, that's elevated post-exercise oxygen consumption. In that people thought that you needed to do HIIT training or high intensity interval training in order to burn fat and keep your heart rate elevated throughout the day. We know now that this isn't necessarily the best way, both acutely and chronically, to achieve sustainable weight loss and accordingly get cardiovascular and musculoskeletal benefits. HIIT is so metabolically taxing that 1 to 2 days per week is all someone really needs in order to increase their VO2 max, running speed, and power output, if that is indeed their goal. This then brought on the, getting in your steps movement, which is currently in right now, and as is like the hybrid training approach. So while high intensity interval training is not by any means bad, it does show a lot of grit, character, and hard work if you do it consistently, not just once, but like all the time. But with the case of HIIT, less is going to be more. So really do it sparingly. Alrighty, the next section on why you should do cardio as a lifter, because this one's big, and this one goes out to all the lifters out there who still think that they shouldn't do cardio because they're going to kill their gains. The most important muscle in the body is going to be your heart, and your heart really needs to be around for your entire life. You don't necessarily need the biggest biceps to live a long life. So listen up here. Why you should do cardio as a lifter. Number 1, improve mitochondrial function and recovery capacity. Zone 2 cardio significantly enhances mitochondrial density and function, which can improve your ability to oxidize fats and generate energy efficiently. Athletes with more robust mitochondrial profiles can sustain higher workloads with less fatigue, which is an advantageous edge in both the endurance and strength training games. By targeting that aerobic threshold, Zone 2 training teaches your muscles to rely more on fat as a fuel, which is going to preserve glycogen for intense lifting. Over time, this enhances endurance, accelerates recovery between sessions, and increases overall training volume capacity. We've discussed metabolic flexibility in a few different videos now, in that we can train our bodies to utilize both stored carbohydrates or glycogen as well as body fat or triglycerides, both as viable fuel sources during exercise. So if you think about it this way, if you think about someone who cannot run more than 1 or 2 miles without getting tired, they are by definition not in great cardiovascular or musculoskeletal shape, and they should work on that for a longevity standpoint. If someone can, however, run upwards of 20 or more miles per day, like professional runners and ultra runners, they are by definition in better shape than the previous person. And a contributing reason as to why those ultra runners can bang out 20 plus mile days every day is because they never really run too low on their fuel sources. They can constantly burn off fat and carbs for energy, requiring them to just eat less food before exercise as well as during exercise. It's almost like increasing the miles per gallon you get on your car. The car just becomes more efficient. It's like getting a hybrid car, right? You just don't need to fill up on gasoline too often. Next, why you should do cardio as a lifter. Number 2 is to support heart health and longevity. Your VO2 max, or maximal aerobic capacity, is one of the strongest predictors of how long you will live. We've also done a couple of episodes specifically devoted to what VO2 max is, why it's an important marker of longevity, and accordingly, how you can train it. We now know that individuals with higher VO2 max values exhibit lower risks of cardiovascular disease and all-cause mortality, independent of other risk factors. Improving cardiovascular fitness through regular zone 2 training, not once per week, not twice per week, not 3 times per week, but mostly 4, 5, 6, 7 days a week, does not just support performance. This zone 2 cardio is truly an investment in your health span and your longevity. Even modest improvements in aerobic fitness have been shown to lower the risk of stroke, heart failure, and age-related diseases. Number 3, cardio improves nutrient partitioning and glucose tolerance, aka don't get type 2 diabetes. Aerobic training can improve how your body processes and stores nutrients, favoring muscle glycogen replenishment over fat storage. Regular endurance exercise increases insulin sensitivity, which helps shuttle glucose into muscle as opposed to it being stored as body fat. Also, cardio-trained individuals exhibit better glucose tolerance and improved metabolic flexibility, which we had talked about before. This metabolic edge supports lean mass retention during fat loss and primes the body for anabolic processes post-meal. And lastly, on why lifters should do more cardio is better recovery between sets and sessions. A stronger aerobic base improves your ability to clear lactate byproducts like lactate and acidity or metabolic byproducts like lactate and acidity between sets, which enhances strength and endurance work capacity, such that athletes with better aerobic fitness can recover faster between resistance training bouts, which allows for higher quality reps and shorter rest times. Zone 2 training also accelerates parasympathetic nervous system activity, so the rest and digest system, which helps with recovery after tough lifting sessions, allowing for improved HRV or heart rate variability. It improves sleep and reduces soreness. This means you are more likely to hit your next training session ready to perform than dragging it and being under-recovered. And the big picture here, since volume is one of the highest drivers of skeletal muscle hypertrophy, if you can recover faster in between sets and sessions, you can get in more weekly sets across the week, month, and year, which only increases the amount of gains you can accrue. So do your cardio if you want to get bigger and stronger. Awesome. So let's talk about what not to do, because we're talking about all these science-backed ways to incorporate your endurance training with your lifting, which is awesome. But let's talk about some common pitfalls. The first is to not do fasted cardio excessively if you are already in a deficit, as it's just going to add unnecessary stress. Doing fasted cardio while already in a caloric deficit can just amplify cortisol output, or the stress hormone, which may blunt muscle protein synthesis and slow down your recovery. Studies have shown that excessive fasting or stress-based exercise conditions can lead to chronically elevated cortisol, contributing to fatigue, muscle loss, and overtraining. While fasted cardio can slightly increase fat oxidation acutely, meaning the short term, Schoenfeld et al. In 2014 found no significant difference in fat loss between fasted and fed cardio when calories were equated. So if you're already dieting, there's little added benefit and potentially greater physiological cost to layering fasted training on top. And further on this, calories in and calories out over a 24-hour period is what counts towards someone losing weight and someone not losing weight. Next, don't perform long, intense cardio sessions right before or right after heavy resistance training workouts. And we kind of talked about this a little bit before. Pairing long or intense cardio sessions directly with lifting can impair neuromuscular performance and reduce strength gains. Concurrent training, especially when cardio precedes lifting, can compromise adaptations in maximal strength and hypertrophy. Even doing cardio right after lifting can interfere with recovery and dampen the muscle protein synthetic response, such that excessive cardio done near resistance training may increase muscle breakdown and delay adaptation, especially when you're in a low energy state. And third, speaking of low energy state, do not neglect your fueling. Undereating during cardio phases is a fast track to overtraining and stalling your progress. Energy availability is critical for adaptation, and chronic underfueling during cardio phases can lead to hormonal disruption, fatigue, and even loss of lean mass. Athletes with low energy availability can have impaired metabolic function, poor recovery, and worse training outcomes. The IOC, or International Olympic Committee, formally defines this condition as relative energy deficiency in sport, or RED-S, where inadequate intake relative to output causes a cascade of health and performance issues. So to optimize cardio adaptations and support muscle growth, consistent fueling is going to be non-negotiable. As we say, we cannot outsmart thermodynamics. If you want to get bigger and stronger, you're going to have to eat more. Awesome. Let's get into a little sample week of training. And I've done these in a couple of my other videos as well, just as kind of an application of what we're talking about here. So then you can kind of run away with it and decide, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what I not want to do. But this is kind of how the week could be structured. So this is a strength focus while adding in some cardio if you're new to it. Monday, you can do an upper body session in the AM because that's your primary focus, is gaining strength, with a PM zone 2, which is moderate intensity bike. Remember, we don't want to have too much disruption, both locally and systemically, by doing too much running. So AM upper body, PM zone 2 bike. Tuesday, only lower body because we know it's going to be more systemically fatiguing. If you're doing exercises like lunges, leg press, squats, deadlifts, hips thrusts, those are all really challenging and energy taxing and metabolically taxing exercises. Wednesday, do not take an off day, active cardio. Take a couple walks, get your butt moving, get your 10,000 steps in or 20,000 steps in. Thursday, AM full body with a PM incline walk. Again, it's very little pounding on the joints. Friday, AM upper body with active recovery at night. Go for a nice long walk. Saturday, 30 to 45 minutes of zone 2 cardio. That's going to be your only cardio for the day. And Sunday, AM lower body followed by active recovery in the afternoon. And a couple notes on this. You can always use a heart rate monitor, which you can use like a watch or a chest strap, or just the RPE scale, so the rating of perceived exertion scale, during workouts and throughout the week to monitor fatigue and avoid doing too much too soon. And if this seems a little bit easy for you and you like lifting 5 days a week or 6 days a week, that's awesome. Start to sprinkle in a little bit of cardio here and there, but just don't try and do too much too soon. Alrighty, let's land this plane. To conclude, we should know by the end of this episode that cardio or cardiovascular training does not destroy gains when done right. Interference is real, but it is manageable. Smart programming is the solution. The interference effect is well demonstrated in the literature, especially when high frequency, high intensity cardio is paired with heavy lifting, but it's not a death sentence for your muscle growth. Research has detailed that interference is primarily driven, as we had said, by poor timing and modality selection, not the cardio itself. You can absolutely build strength and improve cardio fitness at the same time with smart programming. It's just important, however, to separate your resistance training and your endurance session by several hours, or even alternating days to minimize molecular conflicts and preserve your hard-earned gains. Next, there is a growing body of evidence showing that concurrent training or hybrid training when intelligently structured, can improve VO2 max, muscle size or hypertrophy, as well as muscular strength, all simultaneously within the same program. The important part is the thoughtful integration, not total avoidance of both domains. And we can see this in elite military operators and hybrid athletes alike. They're all living proof that you can both be muscular and metabolically conditioned. With personalized programming, you can build a body that performs as good as it looks without sacrificing strength for endurance. So with that, I do want to thank you all for tuning in to another episode, whether you watch this as a video or you took this in the audio format as a podcast. I really hope you did enjoy. If you did, please like, subscribe, and share this with a friend or one of your friends who you go to the gym with who might need to hear it. As well as please subscribe to both my podcast, Simple Science, as well as my Instagram, so you can get more information on exercise science, nutrition, performance, longevity, and I only touch upon the most up-to-date scientific information, not only so I can continue learning, but so you can continue learning as well. So I love making these videos, and as always, it is about that time of day again when I'm going to go to the gym to lift some weights. I hope you will as well. I did my cardio this morning because that's more important to me. Now I'm going to hit the weights, and remember everyone, consistency wins, and I'll catch you all in the next episode. Thanks so much for watching.